Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Mindset-Conquest podcast, where every week I'll be joined by a special guest who will be sharing what they've experienced as the biggest failure in their life, but most importantly, the lessons that they've learned from that experience. I'll be spending time with people that I've met throughout my life's journey in business, music, and sport. And the goal is to provide listeners like yourselves with the motivation needed to get through all of life's challenges and learn not to be afraid of failure, but rather to embrace it. Please like and subscribe and enjoy this episode. I'm Chris Atwell. On today's episode, I'm joined by Mike Zimic. Mike is a former Pharma sales rep, a product manager, a national sales manager, and secondary school teacher that is fascinated with communication. He continues to research concepts that will help pharma reps to better connect with healthcare professionals to enhance the lives of the patients they serve. He loves camping with his family and playing the drums. Welcome to the Mindset-Conquest podcast. I've got a very special guest with me today, Mike Zimic. Mike, how are you?
I'm good, my friend. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me on my podcast today. Really appreciate your time. Why don't we start with sharing some information about who Mike is, where you're from, what do you do for a living, all the good stuff.
Oh, cool. I grew up in Niagara in a town called Welland. And in the 90s, I started working with a pharmaceutical company after I left school. And it was great. Got to get out to different offices and visit doctors. And it was a great intro for me. And especially I had a little bit of a thin skin. We can talk about that later when we get to the main topics of the podcast. But I developed that very well. And then I got into teaching. I left 2004 and went back to Teachers College. And I did that for 10 years. I live in Hamilton, and that's where I was teaching, Hamilton, Ontario. And then I got a call back to Pharma in 2014, which I didn't anticipate. And I knew that if I was going to leave teaching, which I really enjoyed, I wanted to try new things. And I was very fortunate to be able to do so. I was a product manager and did a lot of marketing for 5 years. And then I was a national sales manager. And then in December 2019, I thought it was going to be a really good idea to start my own business, consultancy business based on communication and using communication to improve results in a number of fronts. And it was good for about 3 months. And then the world changed. And that brings us up to where we are now.
Yeah, good old COVID kind of threw stick in everybody's spokes and momentum, particularly entrepreneurs who are, building a business that requires you to travel. I would guess. So, tell me a little bit about your journey here, because it's interesting. You went to school, you got into sales, you went to became a teacher, went back to sales. Now you're a consultant now. Yep. Why the transition between sales to teaching in high school?
My wife is a teacher, and I'd come home every night. We'd talk about her day and what school was like, and it was always a desire of mine or an interest of mine to want to go into training. And I at the company that I was working with in Pharma at the time, they were based in Montreal. And I noticed when I would go to meetings, I would speak to a lot of the people that were at the office, and they were all divorced after they moved to the office. So I thought, that's probably maybe not a good life decision. So that's where teaching started entering into my mind. And I really wanted to get involved in extracurricular activities as well. So so I made the jump. It was a huge change in starting back over. But over time, I really learned a lot. Taught 25 different courses over that time, from science all the way to drama. So it was a huge learning opportunity for me, and it set me up for very well for what I'm doing now.
What was your favorite topic to teach?
Oh, man. So I love science, and I'm a biology guy. So I really enjoyed science, talking about genetics and evolution, those types of things. It's always cool because you can leave the facts a little bit and start bringing in more subjective conversation. Right. But I really enjoyed drama when I started teaching. I got a second teachable in drama, and I did that for about 4 years. And it was super cool. I learned a lot, and probably one of the things that I use a lot now is improv. Met some great guys from Second City, and it's very empowering to really be in the moment and improve your listening skills.
For sure. Are you going to be the next Prime Minister of Canada? with the process?
No, but I have the qualifications too, don't I?
Yes.
Who needs to be a lawyer anymore? Good one, man. But I was a full-time teacher. I wasn't a supply drama teacher. So
Right. Yeah. And
awesome.
then back to pharma. I'm trying to understand, pharmaceutical industry seems like an industry where you would need certain qualifications to sell. What was kind of the reason why you got called back, I guess, into pharma?
It was just more one of practical means for them. And I think that it was a former colleague that I had worked with, and she had become the sales manager and eventually became my manager. Mm-hmm. And there was a territory that was open, and it was becoming more and more challenging finding people that knew the clinics and the doctors and understood the drug. And because it was a pretty steep learning curve for that therapeutic area. So, mm-hmm. And I think I was kind of ready at that point. I've been teaching for 10 years, so that was something I considered. And, it's really cool, man, because sales and teaching they are really hand in hand, right? When you get a group of 14-year-olds in front of you and you have to talk about the periodic table, you could just do it any way you want. But if you're able to really hook them in and then connect with them and then get them interested right off the bat, then you're able to have much more success. And the other cool thing about 14-year-olds that I really learned, 15, 16, 17-year-olds, is as soon as they're bored, they tell you. They're not as polite mature enough as an adult where they would feign interest, right? So that's another thing where it's like constantly, quickly, if things aren't going on the right track, how can you pivot right away to try and re-engage?
Interesting. Yeah. I never thought about that, where, a teenager, they're sitting in class and you could tell they're bored because they're starting to flick their pencil or they tell you, or they look at their phone. Exactly. Right. Yeah.
Did you say something?
Yeah, phones didn't exist when I was in high school, but, but yes, adults now, particularly, potential clients, I think, who are in positions where, they're making buying decisions. They're going to respect your time and try to give you that, at least the benefit of doubt of, hey, what are you trying to communicate to me here? But if you miss the mark and you don't capture their attention, sometimes it's hard to know until it's too late.
Totally. And especially if time is, of the essence. If you only have 10 minutes, mm-hmm. then you got to make that magic happen within that period of time. Yeah. And it's really challenging, especially when you're talking about behaviors and we all go through autopilot to some degree, and we have these heuristics that are really helpful for us. But if you can't ignite something that gets someone to consciously think about what they're doing and consider changing, then it's just another check mark in the CRM rather than a different result that you were hoping for.
So what do you consult on now? You're focused on the pharmaceutical industry. I understand.
Yeah.
You've got this teaching experience selling therapeutic drugs. What is your approach to training, to teaching people?
So I was really, and I still am, I'm interested in learning about how people communicate and what drives people and what motivates people to do what they do. And so this just brought me down a rabbit hole of learning all these different concepts. And so I thought, well, how can what do you do with these concepts? It's great in theory, but how can you actually apply it to reality? And then if you can apply it to something in pharma, I talk a lot about pharma, but I work with physicians' offices as well. I work with physician organizations. I work with governments, healthcare governments out east. So yeah, it's just more tying around how can you provide better value for a patient, no matter what your role is. Right. And so I designed my workshops around a concept, and we introduced that idea, and then we just work through scenarios about how you can apply that concept to try and better connect with someone and get a better understanding about what motivates them and how you can help them to have a better, if you're talking directly to a patient, how changing their behavior or engaging with the medication or whatever it may be have a better result. If you're a salesperson, how can you better engage with the doctor or prospect that's sitting across from you? If you're a manager, how do you motivate your rep, right? So it's kind of like, I call an inside-out awareness of communication.
Interesting.
because you got to learn a bit more about yourself in order to identify it in others.
Yeah, well, self-awareness always comes first, right? It's if you're not aware of yourself, how do you expect to be aware of others?
Yeah, and once you get into it, it's never ending. It's a cool journey concept to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And over the course of COVID, how did you kind of cope with, doing these sort of trainings? Was it all virtual? Like, how did it go for you?
Yeah, it was all virtual. It was pretty slow at the beginning. So it's good and bad, right? The good news is that I hadn't created enough to have to change everything that I did. So I had to reimagine how I was going to do this and then just simply learn what I wanted to do and then apply it from there. So yeah, it's all virtual workshops, Zoom, Microsoft Teams. And I find there's a sweet spot of about 75 minutes, 90 minutes where virtually things start to change or people brown out a little bit. So and I do videos ahead. So I'll present people with the entire concept of what we're talking about. And then it's all interactive, going through scenarios, case studies, and stuff like that. So you can apply it. Because really, the biggest challenge for training these days is the practice. You can talk about all this other stuff and all these great things, got all kinds of great books here, but how do you practice it all the time so that you can actually apply it and get that into your subconscious? Like music, right? You're a music guy. Like when you're playing something, you want to be able to get that internalized so that you're focusing on and listening to everything rather than trying to figure out what you're doing. Yeah,
I've always been really into training myself. I grew up in a family full of teachers. I was not an exemplary student by any means, but I feel like teaching is something that I'm pretty good at. And one of the things that I've recognized through doing trainings for people and having trainings done that I've participated in as well is that the concepts always seem like they make sense up front, that very useful. But then to your point, when it comes to applying it, it's very easy to go back to your old ways, your old habits, and not apply these new learnings. So, what kind of approach do you take to motivate people to continue to use or try it for an extended period of time so that it becomes habitual to them?
Yeah, great question. And of course, there's no simple answer on that. But for the time that we do have together, I really try to make it so that it's less about me talking and more about them actually with the concept that we're talking about. So it's interesting you bring this up. The idea of human scaffold is based off of a concept of learning by this guy named Vygotsky, who is a Russian psychologist from the 1800s. And his work was lost till the 70s, and then they rediscovered it. And it was this idea of scaffolding. So imagine someone learning, and you're there to watch them learn as the person who is the facilitator or teacher, whatever that may be. And while they're going through it, you're there to help them up and create a scaffolding of learning. So it's that's kind of how I base all of my anything I do, whether it's an in-person or virtual workshop, just to get people to do that themselves. And then how can you then come up with ideas for them to practice that when they're outside the workshop? The more you do it, the more you practice, the better you are. So I leave work with the manager or whomever it is as well for them to coach it through as well. But it's all about, at some point, it's about the individual's desire to want to learn and apply it.
Yeah, very cool. I like it. Well, thank you for the snapshot of your journey so far.
Yeah, man.
The premise of this podcast is really around providing people with an opportunity to learn from others when it comes to, the failures, the mistakes, the challenges they've faced in their lives, and the learnings that they've taken from, those quote unquote failures. So, you and I had a really good pre-conversation, but I'm not going to steal the thunder here. I want to ask you, I'm curious, Mike, what do you consider to be your biggest failure? And what did you learn from that?
So, yeah, this was interesting because when we first connected, you kind of threw me back a little bit with that question, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is something that I've really been digging into in the past couple of years, and it comes down to how safe do you play it. There's people that are inherently are comfortable taking risks, and based on the information that they have in a given situation, they're just like, let's try it, let's see what happens, versus the opposite of someone who maps everything out to prevent any type of failure or hiccups, bumps in the road. There's always going to be things that happen, but if you plan it too much, then you might not do it. Right. So I'm on that side. I'm not on the risk side, but I'm slowly getting there. And I have a couple of examples of ways that I've got how I'm getting better at that. And we can talk about that. But just to finish this question, when I look back, I never set myself up to fail. And this is another part. After we hung up, I really thought about this. And that's, how do you define failure?
Right.
So I was thinking about it and I purposely didn't go and look on Google or, go on Webster's to figure out what the actual definition would be. But from my experience of, my own life, but then also 10 years of teaching and seeing what really defines failure, I think it's when you give your all, and no matter what you do, you're not able to achieve the standard that perhaps you set or maybe others set for you.
Right.
Giving up, and I'd like to hear your opinion on this, is giving up considered failure? I guess technically it is, but if you didn't put the effort in, then did you give yourself the opportunity to fail? So you asked a simple question. I went on with a longer answer, but I would have to say that I can't think of anything that was a huge, colossal failure, because I'm always planning 25 steps ahead. And I think that has not been helpful to me. I think I need to start coming over to this side. So this is the most difficult journey of my life, starting my own business, because I'm doing things that are completely out of my comfort zone. And I haven't failed yet. Not as good as I could be, but we're getting there.
Yeah, and it's the failure to fail, right? You used the term last time we spoke around anti-failure. You've been so cautious in your approach, from what I gathered when we were talking, that it was almost like you were afraid to fail, so you tried to set yourself up so you would never fail. And that's great. I mean, I think planning is very important. It allows you to establish goals and coherent actions that are going to assist you in achieving your objectives. But if you play it too safe, are you getting to where you want to be? Mm-hmm. So how are you perceiving, you say you're starting to take more risk. Elaborate on that a little bit more, and how your past of like trying to avoid failure maybe kind of restricted you a little bit to where you want to be.
So I'll apply it to two different areas, right? So one is I was in a sales environment with drugs that are approved by the Health Protection Branch, FDA approved, Health Canada approves them. So it's like, they all work. So, and you're influencing, you're talking to people and encouraging them to prescribe something. I never walk out with a bill, right? So in that's a very safe place, because it's not like if you don't make this number in 3 months, then you're on probation and you're out. Mm-hmm. Because there's more of a relationship build that's into that. Then you go to teaching, and in the province of Ontario in Canada, it has one of the best pensions in the world. Mm-hmm. So there are a number of people that are amazing teachers, but there's others that maybe it's not the right fit for them, right. Yet they're hanging on. Gotta stick around for the pension. So that's safety. So there's no, like in my life, I didn't set myself up for situations where I had to. There was a fork in the road. If I don't do this, I'm going to fail, or if I go this way, until now. So one thing that's been super, super helpful to me since I started Human Scaffold was hanging around with people that are completely the opposite of me.
Right.
People that are entrepreneurs, people that take risks, and they're like, what are you worried about that for, man? Don't worry about those details. Focus on this. Why are you, don't focus there. Just get this done and worry about that, and then move to the next phase. Yeah. Whereas I wanted to, if I just sat and used my old mindset of thinking of getting everything planned and having it perfect and then pressing play, it would never happen, because every time I get all the parts together, someone comes and mixes them up and I have to rearrange them, right? You can't predict what's going to happen in this type of entrepreneurial, but I'll also say sales environment, because that's essentially what I'm doing. I'm introducing myself, something new to people that they're not familiar with. So how do I build that trust and get them to show the value that I can help them solve their problems?
And I'm sure you've been rejected quite a few times with your proposals, right?
Yes, for sure. And some it took 2 years. Like, there's something that just came together last week that I literally started in 2020. And so I think having that persistence is certainly helpful, but also taking certain risks in what I initially proposed, and then just saying, no, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to guarantee this. I'm going to guarantee this outcome. And then you capture someone's attention. Oh, cool. Okay, let's try it, right? Whereas I may not have done that before because, well, how can you guarantee it? I want to take a risk. What if this happens? What if that happens, right? It's almost like these, when I went around traveling as a national sales manager, every time I went somewhere, there was these signs of people, like warning signs, you know, those stick men signs, where there's like a guy, don't do this, you'll fall down, and there's like a line through something saying don't do that. It really made me think, like, our whole society is based around preventing risk, like putting yourself into situations where you don't take risks, so you don't make mistakes, so you don't fail, because people don't want to get sued or whatever the reason is. But it's like, have we created a society that is less, or a culture that doesn't promote entrepreneurial pursuits?
Yeah, that's something I've thought about as well, you know, and I've heard some pretty cool quotes. I think Kevin OLeary, who's obviously, you know, rich Canadian, just bought Coinberry, by the way, if you're into crypto.
Oh, cool.
He put it along the lines of companies and schools teach you to get that salary because, you know, you're going to be comfortable and you'll get that pension, and they almost feed it to you like a drug, right? So that you come back for more.
Yeah.
To keep you away. Or it keeps you away from your dreams, basically. Yeah. Is kind of the premise of how he puts it together. I'm not quoting him exactly, but it's funny you say that, because I've thought about that, and it's like, yeah, you know, we're brought up going to school that, you know, you pick a profession, you work for somebody, you get you build your career, you build your pension, you retire, and then that's when you're free. Whereas they don't teach you in school or in high school at all about how to build a business yourself, how to become an entrepreneur, how to create a product that you can take for a spin and see if that'll make you a multimillionaire, right? These kinds of things, they take the risk out of it in our society by guiding you down the road of quote unquote security. Yeah.
Taught by people that chose the path of security themselves, right?
They don't know any better, right? That's it.
Yeah. So it really is a good point. And I don't know what the answer is, unfortunately.
So when you're coaching and training sales reps in the pharmaceutical industry, do you ever touch on that, about risk taking, about you know?
Yeah, man, that's what we did last week. I had 2 workshops, and it's so funny because you're dealing with physicians, and what's the physician credo? Do no harm. It's not take chances to make people feel better. It's do no harm, right? And then you're dealing in pharma, and many other industries, of course, are similar, where there's compliance departments, and they tell you all the things you can't do. And then they turn around and say, now go be creative.
Yeah.
But come back. You don't want to turn the person off, because if you can't go back, then you can't make an impact, right? So, but yeah, go do something different. Go take a risk, and you're getting a great salary, and you're getting bonus, and what is it rewarding? But you don't want to reward too much, because then that's when people start taking too many chances, and then it ends up on the front page of the paper, and then we don't want that. So don't do that. Yeah. So what are your 10 ideas? Okay, maybe number 10 might work. Let's look at that. And I'm being kind of facetious a little bit as well, but it's, yeah, that's what a lot of the workshop was. How do you gauge who you're talking to, and then helping to push them to take a chance by prescribing a different drug, or if you're a doctor and you're meeting with a patient, to how do you get them to see their side of things rather than Dr. Google's side, right? Mm-hmm. There's all these things to think about. So how do you, I don't know. So those are the things we talked about, and it's really super interesting because a lot of it ties back to bias, cognitive bias.
Right. And
what we believe to be the right thing.
Yeah, going back to your passion around human behavior and the way they think. Yeah.
Yeah.
So who would you consider to be, the three most influential people to you, Mike?
Oh, personally,
professionally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man. So, my wife for sure, right? Like, those are the moments when I come home and I'm like, can I do this? This is crazy. I'm that low risk. Let's not take any chances. Let's get it to a high standard. So I need permission to try things sometimes. And I realize that about myself. Even when I'm trying to overcome it in my head, and I'm like, just do it, man. I'm like, well, I'm just going to pass it by her first and see. So for sure, that's a super big influence. I've told her brothers, and they were certainly influenced me my whole life. So I would throw them, as well as my dad, who passed away, but for sure from a family standpoint. And I have another friend named Paul, who I was roommates with him years ago as a sales guy, and he's the complete opposite of me. We talk almost every day, and he's had such a huge impact on me because he's just like, dude, no, what's the matter with you? Do that, like, do this. And it also is reciprocal. There's times when I say, hey, have you thought about that? Let's break this down. Let's think about this before you act, right? So part of what I think would be awesome for salespeople is who's the opposite to you in your style? Who's the opposite to you as in how they manage risk and take chances and do different things? Hang out with that person. And once you see them do it, and you see that it's okay, and you see that there's a result, then you're willing to take the chance to try it out. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you look at it and you're like, that guy's crazy, man. Because he's different. They're different than you. So it's like, how do you put yourself in the situation where you can watch it unfold? For me, that's huge. And that's where these three people are really helpful to me.
Yeah, I like that idea around partnering with kind of the other personality type. Mm. In on your team, I guess it is. And I'm thinking back to my experience when I was working at Purelator in Edmonton in mid 2000s, and I'd moved to Edmonton from Toronto to tackle this territory. And I'm the Ontario guy going to Alberta. First of all, I'm very outgoing. I was
you're the interloper.
I have no problem jumping into a conversation and taking risks. And I think for me, I was so on that side of the spectrum that my boss saw it at the time, Mike, and he partnered me with somebody who was a lot more calm, reserved, and introverted to tour me around the whole town and have meetings with this person just to kind of get a grasp on how they approach the business. And it helped me a lot because I take risks so much, and I'm willing to say anything to try and get. At the time, I was young and gunning for sales.
Yeah, you were
the sale that it taught me to kind of to listen more and to be a little more patient and observant. Yeah, so it works on both sides for sure.
Totally, man. And it's so funny that you talk about that because, like, when I went and became a teacher, you go to teachers college and then they're just like, you're done. We may have a 1 hour professional development thing or something twice a year, but after that, you're
a teacher now. That's it. Yeah.
Whereas in sales, that was a cool thing. You do ride with or work with and stuff like that. You see how other people do stuff. You share best practices. Like, that's a really cool part about being in sales is that openness. Once you embrace yourself and you get a team full of people that are open to learn from each other, then you start adding things to your repertoire and your style to, be a bit more of a, I don't know, chameleon's maybe not the best word, but you know what I mean? Like,
ambidextrous. I like the term ambidextrous. You listen when it's time, you speak when it makes sense. And not everybody has those skills up front. And I love organizations that coach people and give them training opportunities to learn new things, to become more ambidextrous.
Yeah.
I've got a rep that I'm working with right now who he's gung-ho. He reminds me of me, 15, 16 years ago. And the beauty is he's open to listening. And as long as you're open to listening, yes, and you recognize kind of what your actions are imposing on others or how they're perceived, you can get better over time. So. Yeah.
And you think of someone like that, they probably embrace change a little bit more as well, right? Versus someone that's a bit more skeptical or whatever it is. And you just got to help work people through those things.
Yeah, exactly.
And you just reminded me of one other thing I wanted to mention. I was listening, I'm a big Leafs fan, so I was listening to the radio, and Dave Poulin, who's a ex-hockey player, said he learned way more from teammates than he ever did from any coach. Just little things sitting on the bench and saying, hey, man, just turn your skate a little bit more. And when you take your stick, do this. Just little things like that you have to live and be throughout. And I think tying back to what we're talking about with salespeople and just having a day in the car, you can't replace that with a book sometimes. Or, you can supplement it with all these things, but sometimes you just can't replace the time of being together and learning these things, right?
Yeah. That real teamwork approach is crucial to the success of any sales organization, for sure. But the right coach will identify that stuff and will learn from their players as well, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Or know when to get out of the way.
Yeah. That's important too. Good stuff. Well, Mike, this has been a really pleasant conversation. I appreciate your time. I love how your journey took you from, a safety net kind of approach to things. Failure is not something you really want to, or you just weren't set up to experience. And then now you've jumped into this entrepreneurial journey where things are going to happen. You're experiencing failure. You're trying to set yourself up for success, and that's part of the journey. So I wish you a great amount of luck, and I hope you kick ass with Scaffold. I love the concept. I think the niche of pharmaceuticals sounds like it's right for you from your experience. So yeah, go get them, man. I think. Before we go, where can our listeners, where can people connect with you online?
I have a website, humanscaffold.com, and on LinkedIn as well, based on my name, Mike Zimic, Z-I-M-I-C, where I post often and try to come up with tips to help salespeople and just improve relationships in general.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again, and I wish you a fantastic day, Mike. Take care.
Cool. Same to you. Thanks, Chris.
See you later.